Welcome, 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 you guys. Welcome to the Lightning Talks. I will be your moderator, Simply T Poetry. You can simply call me T. And I'm super excited because we have a slew of amazing presenters today. So I just want to get straight into it. They're going to be talking about all types of different things. And you need to be very aware that it is amazing, amazing time that's about to happen. So without any further ado, I want to go ahead and introduce our first presenter. Her name is Haley Ha'ana Stephenson. She was born and raised in the village of Akaton in Alaskan Aleutian Islands. She keeps her upbringing close to her so she can access all aspects of the indigenous ways. Haley Ha'ana is a PhD student in Native American Studies at the University of Davis with designated emphasis in performance studies. She has a master's of art and cultural studies and a bachelor's in international studies with a concentration in Russian and university and at the University of Anchorage, where she recently served as an adjunct professor of Alaska Native Studies. She explores indigenous governance politics and resistant movements towards fostering sustainable indigenous futures while centering kinship, reciprocity, and sustainability from sustenance cosmology to which she was raised. This amazing woman as a scholar, an activist, my thing is what I love about her is as digital and activist as she is a performer, she is a dancer. And today she's going to talk about the historically traumatic move from home, what it means to serve as an Alaskan Native woman. So please help me to bring to the screen Miss Haliana. Thank you so much for joining us.
Ang alagum ayara asach dakok, unangach akok, akutanam ilaran ang echtakok ama arach dakok, denainam tana ilaran tanari kok. Hi everyone, thank you for that introduction, T. My name is Haley Hana alagum ayara Stepatin. I'm coming to you virtually from Denaina Esnena, the homelands of the Denaina people in what is known as Anchorage, Alaska. I am Unangach. I'm an enrolled member of the native village of Akitan, and I was born and raised in Akitan Village in the Aleutian Islands of Alaska. I'm a PhD student in Native American Studies with a designated emphasis in performance and practice at the University of California, Davis. My talk today engages these multiple identities while also embracing stark refusal to identity politics. In upholding this sentiment, though, it's important for me to ground myself in my accountabilities. I am first and foremost accountable to my family and Unangach people who have had a long-standing, critical, and complex relationship with the United States military. I have always known who I am and how I belong outside of my military service. Military service, in my experience, having enlisted at 17 years old, was a way out for me. However, I'll clarify my benefits of service with careful attention to how I understand the military-industrial complex under settler colonial regimes in imperial contexts. My experience enlisting as a fire controlman in the Navy made life for me livable. And I don't mean this in a patriotic way or in a way that bolsters military service emphasizing camaraderie. I mean this literally. Military service literally took me out of the impoverished, dangerous, and at-risk lifestyle I had made upon moving out of my village and into Anchorage, Alaska, where I dropped out of high school, got on probation, and found myself in military school where I was able to get a GED and have hope for a future that was focused on what was important to me. Taking care of my late father and doing good work in honor of my family and Unangach people who I am accountable to. I am not accountable to a settler nation state. Joining the Navy gave me stable and steady income. I had a place to live and I had food to eat, even if I lived in barracks or in a berthing on a ship with 60 other people. I gained life experience and leadership experience. I was able to foster qualities that have served me well in academia, including hard work and dedication, that continue to benefit my life and experiences today, some 12 years after enlisting and 8 years after getting out. Yet still, the title of veteran on my list of identities is not something I hold near or dear, or even close. I distance myself from it and from the community at times. I do this and continuously consider reconciling my relationship as a veteran in talks like these, as a Tillman Foundation scholar, but especially in uplifting voices from Indigenous peoples and relatives who have similar military veteran experiences. To contextualize some of my discomfort in holding the title of veteran and at times feeling complicit in the system of imperialism that continues to oppress Indigenous peoples globally through military endeavors, I'm sharing the following quote from Dr. Eve Tuck Unangach and Kay Wayne Yang's eminent article, Decolonization is Not a Metaphor. Quote, Indian country is the term used in Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, by the US military for enemy territory. The first Black American president said without blinking, quote, there was a point before folks had left, before we had gotten everybody back on the helicopter and were flying back to base where they said, Geronimo has been killed. And Geronimo was the code name for bin Laden, end quote. Elmer Pratt, Black Panther leader, falsely imprisoned for 27 years, was a Vietnam veteran and was nicknamed Geronimo. Geronimo is a settler nickname for the Bedonkohe Apache warrior who fought Mexican and then US expansion into Apache tribal lands. The Colt 45 was perfected to kill Indigenous people during the liberation of what became the Philippines, but it was first invented for the Indian Wars in North America, alongside the Hotchkiss cannon, a Gatling gun that shot cannonballs. The technologies of the permanent settler war are reserviced for foreign wars, including boarding schools, colonial schools, urban schools run by military personnel. So these foreign wars, this foreign land is properly called Indian country. And that's page 31 to 32 in Decolonization is Not a Metaphor. This section of Tuck and Yang's article points to the settler colonial investment in learning these tactics of oppression of Indigenous peoples through military control, first here in United States contexts. These tactics were honed in our Indigenous communities, on our lands, on our waters. They were tried and experimented with Native peoples as guinea pigs to create the greatest military in the world. Facing this history directly, I continue to question the United States military presence abroad to the means of what end, at what cost, for whose benefit. Certainly it's for the proliferation of white supremacy, to continue to spread capitalism, and capitalism serves neoliberalism towards dehumanizing Indigenous peoples and their associated lands, waters, and more than human relatives, to turn these parts of creation into resource. Dehumanization is essential in United States imperial and militaristic pursuits of resource extraction. Spreading capitalism serves United States benefits of investments in overseas resource extraction. And in doing this, attempts to sever Indigenous relations with more than human kin and subsistence lifeways. I bring this up to emphasize attention to the climate change crisis that Indigenous peoples across the globe, and especially in the circumpolar Arctic and subarctic, are experiencing at disproportionate rates, affecting critical access to our subsistence lifeways and cultural connections, our livelihood. This climate change is not a natural cycle. It is human-induced, and it is funded by the United States military. Climate change and Indigenous servitude is funded by the United States military. The historically traumatic move from home is a history not often told outside of Alaskan contexts. This is a trauma of removal, one undergone at the hands of the United States Navy, where only Unangach residents, not white residents, so this was a racialized removal, of 9 villages in the Aleutian Islands, including my hometown of Akutan, were forcibly removed under Navy Admiral Freeman's order shortly after Japan bombed Dutch Harbor on June 3rd and 4th, 1942. Unangach survivors of US and Japanese internment camps would never return to some of their traditional villages, fulfilling the settler colonial project of Indigenous elimination and removal. When I was in Navy boot camp, December 2008 to January 2009, I remember searching through the Blue Jackets manual looking to read about the Unangach removal, even in a bullet point. I didn't find it. And I was angry, and I am angry, because this is a harmful story defining the United States military as a settler colonial project. It harmed and continues to harm Unangach communities today. This history made my choice to serve complicated. There was always a voice inside me wondering if I was dishonoring my relatives who, not even a century ago, were forcibly removed and dehumanized by the same United States Navy. I moved away, and the memory of my family who were forced to move from our traditional homelands by this very military 78 years ago resurfaced. This was the only time in US history where the enemy was on US soil. It's what is known as the Battle of the Aleutians. It led to the internment of over 881 Unangak people who were evacuated to abandoned, broken down fish canneries and mines in Southeast Alaska, more than 1,500 miles away from the Aleutian Islands, while white residents of the Aleutians were allowed to stay. But Unangak were evacuated for their protection. The evacuation led to a World War II internment of Unangak people where 1 in 10 Unangak died from deplorable living conditions and complete disregard by the United States government who put them there. Interned Unangak people were left without food, potable water, and blankets or clothing. Traditional land and subsistence resources in Southeast Alaska are drastically different from the treeless, land animal-less Aleutian Islands. Unangak were interned against their will for the duration of the war, long after the Japanese were routed out of Alaska, and were largely neglected by the very government that said it was protecting them. So when I moved away from home to serve in the Navy, the trauma of my relatives' internment in World War II was ignited. My body remembered the feeling of unease and displacement as a military ship piled hundreds of Unangak on board and removed them from our traditional homelands. My story coalesces with one remembered, embodied, and transferred to me from my grandparents and elder aunties and uncles who survived the World War II internment of Unangak people in Southeast Alaska. Korasikuk, thank you.
Wow, that was absolutely amazing, Heliana. Thank you so, so much for sharing that. I particularly like so many things about your conversation. I just love how you just honestly don't hold back. And despite like any race tensions or anything, it's like, no, like everybody's people have their own suffering. And it doesn't matter who puts who through what suffering, that needs to be addressed. And I'm just so grateful that you like didn't hold your tongue about that. It was an absolute amazing. I'm applauding. If there was like a huge audience, it'd be such a huge applause. I thank you so much. And especially for speaking in your native tongue as well, because that's such a big deal. Like, don't hold back your tongue because they'll try to steal it from you. Okay, I'm off my soapbox. Back to our regularly scheduled program. Hi, you guys. It is yet again Simply T Doubly Poetry here. And we just heard Miss Heliana speak about all things Indigenous and how oppression is happening everywhere and how she is making moves as the activist she is to change it. And we have so much in store. So I'm going to introduce our next speaker. Ooh, I was reading her bio, you guys. I felt so bad chopping it up. Like, it was so much information. And I was like, I'm gonna take 10 minutes to talk about her and she's not gonna have any time to talk. So I'm going to give you a small snippet. Trust me, get to her bio, it's so much. But I'm going to give you all a small snippet of the things that I wanted to highlight. Her name is Ms. Bridgette McCoy. She is the 2020 Congressional Medal of Honor Foundation Community Service Medal recipient, an Army Gulf War veteran. Bridgette has testified congressionally on women veteran concerns, guest lectured at universities around the country, and facilitated workshops that included our nation's senior military. She is nationally requested public speaker who brings equitable, inclusive, and socially impactful accreditation training. She currently serves on several boards. She's a member of the Protect Our Defenders, chair for the National Association of Black Military Women, federally employed women national partner, advisor to morally injury support network for service women, just to name a few. She is an accomplished philanthropist, nonprofit leader, entrepreneur, and author. Today, she's going to be speaking on how to leverage your network for social justice impact, and she has the resume to prove it. Please help me welcome to the screen, Bridgette McCoy. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much, T, for that introduction. That's amazing. I am very appreciative to be here today. And so I want to go ahead and get right into it and I'm going to be reading from some things so I can stay on time. I'm a U.S. Army disabled veteran and Black woman with leadership connection to intersections in the arts, the outdoors, civic new media, machine learning, computer technology, BIPOC, nonprofit leadership communities, and the veteran community. And so I'm going to be talking with you today about leveraging your network for social justice from my lived experience and professional perspective. And so for my career, I've been utilizing a framework of exponential connecting of communities using technology and social media tools, but using them in a collaborative way. And so today, when I speak of a network, I'm speaking of your social capital connections. And when I speak of leveraging, I'm speaking of your influence in those communities and your ability to leverage it to make your community a more diverse and equitable and more inclusive space. So my focus is going to be related to 3 specific areas. And these are areas that I particularly enjoy working in with regard to philanthropy, entrepreneurship, and civic engagement. Now, the organization that I founded, Women Veterans Social Justice Network, has been using experiential informal learning to do just this. We leverage our social platform so that we can connect women veterans to the community at large and create spheres of influence within those communities, both locally and nationally. And what that means is you have an opportunity, if you know someone, right, and you're connected with them professionally, you have an opportunity to engage them by offering your own insight and your own intellectual, your IP, your mind, right? And so that is one way to extend your influence in your community. And another way is extending your influence by supporting the movement of people who, again, have the knowledge, skills, and abilities and want to work in diverse, equitable, inclusive ways, and by helping intersectionally making that happen. So basically what I'm saying is you have influence with someone and you know that someone else has a need and you know that those 2 people have a need and you can connect them together. And so this is one other way that you can do this. And so, for example, WVSJ builds connections with long-range commitment-minded and intentional leaders who understand collaborative work that is diverse on 3 levels, looking at someone's physical attributes, you know, their race, their gender, and so forth, and their intentional capital. And what I mean by intentional capital is that they are intentionally putting forth work that is long range. It's not something short that they're looking at doing, completing just so they can get a like or just so that they can get a photo out. But these are people who are looking toward, you know, 7 generations of work or making sure the next generation has a better life. And so we want to make sure that when you're using your social capital, right, when you're connecting your network, that you're intentionally looking for people who are intentional as well. And then you're connecting those people together so that they can have more impact in the work that they're doing. And so, for example, the way that we do this with WVSJ is we have ambassadors, and our ambassadors, senior ambassadors, are in the community, and they are with our organization, both nationally and locally, and they bring forth change by taking their intellectual property, their knowledge, their skills, their ability, and leveraging it in other communities to bring forth change. And so they're creating new concepts, helping to educate people about women veteran, and then, you know, the cultural in a culturally competent way. They're giving insight onto the nuance of the need of women veteran and in multiple communities. And so they're teaching people how to be geared toward being appropriate to women veteran and include women veteran. And then, for a lack of a better word, they're manned by women veterans. So not only is that person at the table helping to design and implement, you know, design and develop programming, or, you know, engaging people in discourse so that they better understand what's happening, they're also taking the design of the program and implementing it so that they're not only influencing the design, the implementation, but they're on boots on the ground, there to meet with another woman veteran. And so they're physically being the person that is being seen. And so that we've taken that type of framework and applied it in multiple ways. And like I said, in civic engagement, in entrepreneurship, and in philanthropy. And that means we'll have a greater impact. And so each time we do that, the impact is exponential. And so I want to make sure that you understand that all the relationships that you build when you leverage your network, they should be circular. They should not be linear in that you start and then you end, and you start and then you end. You want to build relationships that are ongoing and circular or cyclical. there's always an opportunity to connect. There's always an opportunity to bring value. There's always an opportunity to introduce people to other people. And to do that, you have to build rapport. And that is not a one-off situation. And so sometimes we get entrenched in doing the work and solving problems and making a name for ourselves. We don't always include others in the process. And so in order to, shift how we handle our networks, we have to be looking at opportunities to reach in, reach up, and reach back. So if you keep thinking about that in this process, it'll help you in applying some of these things that we're talking about. And so one of the harder parts of work is making legacy work, right? It's bringing forth people who are legacy minded and not just for the one-off, as I said before. And so I hope that in this few minutes that I had to talk with you, that you get a better understanding of my perspective of how to leverage your network for social justice, focusing on equity, inclusion, and diversity in a civic engagement, philanthropy, and entrepreneurship way, and making sure that your language is inclusive, he, she, they, all of those things, and making sure that when you're speaking to women and you're talking about women, that you're speaking in a way that is inclusive as well. So I want to make sure that your focus and that your intention is another area that you have to make sure that you're, planning your work from. And so I hope that if this is your focus, if this is how you start your process, that you're starting your process being diverse, intentionally diverse, making sure that diversity doesn't just include someone's physicality, but it also includes people who are cognitively different, who have different skills, that you're bringing people in an empathetic and connected way. I believe that if you apply all of these things, that you'll be successful in any work that you do, and you will do so in a way that will live forward in the next 7 generations. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ms. Bridgette. Before I even speak, I don't want to forget somebody asked in Q&A, how do we get in touch with you? So if you would be so kind.
Sure. So sure, there's a multiplicity of ways. You can Google my name and many ways will come up, but Women Veterans Social Justice Network is wvsjnetwork.org. It will take you directly to our Facebook page and you can leave a message. You can also find me at Instagram at SheHeroic, SheHeroic, and at Twitter, same thing, SheHeroic. And for Women Veterans Social Justice, the same thing, WVSJ Network. So I hope that answered your question. You can pretty much find me on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, any of those things if you just search out my name. I do not have a D in my name, so it's Brigette, last name McCoy. And I look forward to meeting each of you. Thank you.
Of course, you can get in touch with Ms. Bridgette. She just did a whole lightning talk on the power of networking. So she's got it all figured out, and you dropped some amazing gems. You brought like the rapport, the intention, circular, not linear. Like these things are like so dynamic. They're not buzzwords, they're intentional, need to do words. So I'm super grateful for your talk. Thank you so much, Ms. Bridgette. That was amazing. You guys, are we ready for the next talk? I'm super excited about this one. Has a special place in my heart. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started on the introduction. Her name is Stephanie Gaddis. She is a United States Navy veteran. She served 2 tours on the USS Simon Lake. In 2015, she founded the Pink Berets, an organization that assists women veterans who struggle with the invisible wounds of war. She has sat on the advisory board for the Association of the Advancement of Mexican Americans at Risk Youth Programs. Most notably, she sits on the panel for Mac Teach PTSD Project, where she educates young men and women on the effects of PTSD within the family systems. Stephanie has been instrumental in paving the way for women veterans in the San Diego region to receive mental health therapeutic services, and this is my favorite parts, at no cost. So without further ado, please bring to the screen Miss Stephanie. Stephanie seems to, oh, here she comes. Here she comes. Yes, how you doing? Okay, you're still on mute.
You know, I've done so many Zooms, you'd think I'd know that by now.
It's quite all right. We are super excited to hear about your talk on the impacts of the invisible injury, which you have so much background to give this talk about. So
I definitely want to give it justice. And T, thank you so much for your energy. Oh my goodness, it's been, I'll tell you, I have learned so much today, and I'm so happy that Minority Vets gave me this platform and this opportunity. So thank you so much. You all are so incredible. I've learned so much throughout the day being a part of this summit. So without further ado, my name's Stephanie Gatha, CEO and founder of the Pink Berets. We are an organization that focuses on women of the United States Armed Forces, veterans and first responders who are struggling with post-traumatic stress, military sexual trauma, traumatic brain injuries, combat trauma stress. And so this segment today was important for me to be able to have a brief amount of time to share the impact of invisible injuries. I think it's really important to identify why it should be a discussion. Our fundamental belief is that everyone should feel like they belong. And in this day and age, the idea of giving a voice to that diversity of perspective and experiences is even more so important. And I say this because invisible injuries is still not very well known. People are, the observer is someone who expects an injury to look like a bruise or a broken arm, or perhaps somebody that may have a visible disability, whereas with an invisible injury, it's not visible. And so then we're talking about psychiatric injuries or disabilities. And to name a few, of course, post-traumatic stress, military sexual trauma, anxiety, depression, traumatic brain injuries, which is high on the pole of describing what an invisible injury looks like. And so when we talk about invisible injuries, oftentimes the women that have come into our organization describe the feeling of not being understood because people are expecting a visible disability. But what they're not understanding or gauging is that that person has been through a significant amount of trauma, a significant amount of pain, and is having to navigate how to get people to understand what that pain is like, again, because it's not apparent, it's not visible. And so to put this in perspective for you, somebody is getting ready to give a presentation. Let's use a TED Talk as an example. And they come out in their wheelchair, and there's a certain awe or there's a certain thought that presents itself to one person. And then you think this person has an obvious disability or an obvious injury, and you beg the notion that something's taken place significant in their life to lead them to be in a wheelchair. Let's take that same person and walk them out to give a presentation without the wheelchair. It's internal, you're not seeing it, but that person has probably been through, if not the same, more of a disability internally through what it is that they experience. And everybody's experience is different. But when you talk about rape, you talk about memory loss, you talk about domestic violence, you talk about depression, chronic anxiety. You talk about having to be medicated in order to live a life of normalcy, at least some semblance of normalcy. We feel like there's still not enough education out there for people to realize an invisible injury is that, an injury. And so I think it's very important to highlight that if you meet somebody perhaps walking in the grocery store, that you take a moment to understand that maybe their sunglasses are on because they suffer from a sensitivity to light, which comes with some of the things that take place with a traumatic brain injury. Or I'll use myself as an example. I don't have sight in one eye. And so sometimes things aren't necessarily clear to me. And so I ask questions, or if somebody can't hear you very well, or if somebody doesn't recall a conversation you may have had, I think it's very important to take a moment to understand that they may in fact have an invisible injury that you are not aware of. So, and it's not so much just understanding what the rule of thumb is for somebody with an invisible injury, but also the compassion that needs to be there in order to build that bridge of understanding that someone that is suffering silently needs to be understood, or perhaps extend a hand to help, or just an ear to listen. But I think being involved in the Pink Berets has also brought a lot of my own misunderstandings of how people are dealing with invisible injuries. It doesn't just impact the individual, it also impacts the family members who are sometimes classified as the caregivers, because they're the ones that are having to work through those nightmares, or having to work through days where they can't leave their home, or having to work through times where they just want to suppress what they're feeling and be alone. So I think it's very important that we lend not just an understanding, but a voice to those that don't have a voice because of their invisible injury. I also want to mention something that I learned recently that was very powerful. And I leave this with you today because I want people to take a moment to understand what this statement meant to me when it was shared. They said, I may not have taken someone's life to protect my own, but I live in the shadows of the men and women who have and are looking for ways to heal because they have taken a life to protect our country. Again, the impact of an invisible injury, you don't see it, but it's there. And so, T, thank you so much for giving me time to step up and talk about what an invisible injury is like, and how it correlates with MST and PTSD and a traumatic brain injury. But most importantly, to highlight why it's so important to not make an assumption that because somebody isn't physically injured, that perhaps they are going through something on the inside.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I really appreciate it. I can hear the passion in your voice when you speak. That is so refreshing. And it's just great for you to have that and just express that and be vulnerable with, so many people who you can't even see. I appreciate that. That's a difficult thing to do. And you mentioned so many great things. I think you and somebody put it in the comments, and I couldn't get over thinking about, as you say it, like the invisible injury is such a great parallelism to life and what that looks like. And not only that, it subconsciously is a visual. And like, I'm a poet, and so like you're like doing these tricks with words, and I am here for it. So I'm super excited.
Well, I think it's important to be able to share, how we navigate these thoughts about others. And I think that a lot of women, unfortunately, have to prove what they're suffering from because you can't see it. And that's a disservice to these women that need to find help or need to be on their journey to healing. And so again, Minority Vets, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to talk about invisible injuries and its impact, but most importantly, to just share in the knowledge of what makes us great as veterans, right? To be able to communicate together and collaborate together like we have today.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much, Ms. Stephanie. So like Ms. Stephanie kind of said so much. She talked about the invisible injuries, and they're so important to not pressure people because you don't know what people are going through. You can't always see the scars. I read a meme once, and it said, just because I carry my weight well doesn't mean it's not heavy. And I feel like that's exactly what her talk said, is just because I look like there's this load on my back isn't a lot. It's totally weighing me down every step. So that was amazing. Thank you so much. We have one more. Thank you. We have one more lightning talk today on this session. And I'm excited about it. We finally got some male energy in here, so we saved them for last. Gonna get roaring at the end here. So I'm gonna tell y'all a little bit about Mr. Landon. He is a veteran of the United States Air Force, a former trade union apprentice, a community college transfer student. Landon deeply passionate about helping veterans achieve socioeconomic mobility through education and access to meaningful employment. That is such an amazing thing. After graduating from William College, Landon joined ZX Ventures, Anheuser-Busch InBev's Global Innovation and Investment Group, where they are a global manager focused on operations and strategy for early stage startups, launching in 11 countries across 3 continents. His current work? He focuses on vocational decision-making of transgender troops and veterans and mentoring veterans through the college application process. Today, his talk is going to be on minority veterans and higher education, a path to socioeconomic mobility. So, welcome to the screen, Mr. Landon. Thank you so much for joining today. Can't hear you yet.
Landon, you're muted.
Thank you. Sorry. Again, you'd think I've been on enough of these already. Yeah, it's been really inspiring and wonderful to be able to be listening to these talks, because the things that the panelists before me have been talking about are things that have impacted my own life as well. And can everybody see? Are we good on the presentation? Okay, I haven't seen any comments saying otherwise, so we're going to go ahead with this. So a little bit about me, as you can see here, and as my intro said, I now work at Anheuser-Busch's Global Innovation Team. It's a pretty cool job, but a couple of years ago, I was digging ditches. And a couple of years before that, I was growing up in rural Wisconsin to a severely religious conservative household where I was homeschooled. And I joined the military because I was hoping to turn myself cis and straight, and that obviously didn't happen. I met a lot of really cool, well-adjusted queer people in the military. And the thing that has stuck out to me the most is that if you don't know what opportunities are out there for you, there's no way to take advantage of them. So this is going to be a little bit of an information-heavy presentation. There's a QR code at the end if you want to scan it, revisit, or access any of the resources. I'm going to try and bring in a bit of my story as well. So the one thing I want to stress is one of the assumptions here is that I'm not saying that college is the only path. What I am saying is for some people, college is the right path. But certificates, associate's degrees, trade schools, non-degree certifications, they're fantastic. I willingly left a trade union apprenticeship because it wasn't the right path for me, but there were plenty of people it was the right path for. The most important part is helping helping veterans get their goals, because we all joined the military for different reasons. I joined personally to get out of town because there was no hope for an LGBTQ person where I was. Other people joined because they need a home. What matters is what we can do with these opportunities, because we don't always get the hand that we were promised. So most veterans, like myself at least, have very limited knowledge about the wide range of opportunities and the institutions that want to recruit them. So most people I know, and the statistics say very broadly, is we go to community college and then you transfer to a state school. This is a fantastic route. But if you wanted to go somewhere else, we have places like Amherst College, which is number 2 in the nation for liberal arts colleges. We have Brown University. Several Ivies are on this list. MIT is actively recruiting veterans. My alma mater, Williams College, number 1 liberal arts college, sorry, Amherst, is now up to 4 veterans. And you can see here over time, we started at 2013 with not very many veterans, and now we're up to 2020 in each of these schools. The only one that went backwards is Georgetown, and we're not exactly sure. I haven't asked them why they're doing that. But the point is here is there are schools, and these are very prestigious universities, and they are actively looking for veterans. They see the value that veterans bring. And this is even more important for minority veterans, because when you have a marginalized identity and you hold intersecting traumas and oppressions and all of these other difficult experiences of being a marginalized individual in the United States military and in the world, the experiences you bring can, one, you, by virtue of existing, are always helping teach other people, which is exhausting. But 2, these schools see you and say, oh, wow, we want somebody like that at our institution. And here's a bunch of money, because you can't afford to go to these schools just on your GI Bill. So they're going to give you a full ride, if not a 75% or more ride. So there's a lot of schools here that say, hey, you are a person who is struggling because the world is set up to be basically against you in a lot of different ways, but you can bring a lot of value to us and we would love to give you a leg up. So if you want to go check this out, Wick Sloan does a fantastic annual survey of veteran enrollment every year on Veterans Day. So again, why elite four-year institutions? Highly selective, actively recruiting veterans. Financial aid packages are fantastic. I got out early after extensive military sexual trauma, and I did not have my full GI Bill. I used my GI Bill for one semester at Williams College. They paid for my housing, they paid for my groceries, they paid for my tuition. The sticker cost is around $75,000 a year, I think, right now. It cost me $6,000 for 4 years. It was more expensive to go to community college. That's the kind of thing that people don't hear when they are at TAPS trying to out process. They're also very well resourced. So when we were talking about invisible injuries and disabilities a moment ago, at well-resourced institutions, they have personalized academic advising. You build a relationship with your advisor because they're usually one of your professors. You also, it's easier to build relationships with the faculty. You have smaller class sizes. I've had classes where it was me and a professor, or there's classes where it's you and maybe one other student and a professor. And then within that, there's also tutoring, free to you, not necessarily paid for by your GI Bill, don't have to go through the bureaucracy of it. And there's career and graduate school advising. There's also accessibility offices and academic accommodations, which are incredibly important for people who are coming in from several years of not having a academic experience, even if your school in the military was very rigorous. Civilian education is just different. And then you're going to do great, but it's different. And then there's also the aspect of ability. So I myself, I have several different invisible disabilities that I work with, and I was able to have extended deadlines. I had flexible note taking. I was allowed to have electronics in class so I could take notes and then search for them later using Control F because I don't really have a very great memory. And all of these things were just accessible to me because the school that I went to as an elite institution wants to see me succeed, and it has the resources to put into me. It has the time and it has the faculty to student ratio to say, oh, you're important and you're struggling, so let's help you. Again, also, we can take a look at alumni networks and brand recognition. Just about everybody's heard of Harvard and Yale. And I hate to say that it's important to buy into the system because that's not what I'm saying. What I'm trying to say is you can go to the system and you can learn how to use it and you can take what it can give you. Because now that I have a degree from Williams College as a trans person from a rural community who should not be alive right now, who has military disability, all of these things, like I still have an incredible amount of privilege, and most of it has come from my Williams College education. And I can reach out to the alumni network and say, hi, I need a mentor. Hi, I don't know what I'm doing with my life. And there's all of these opportunities and there's resources and people want to talk to you, especially if you were a veteran at one of these smaller schools like Amherst and Williams, where you're going to stand out. I was one of 4 veterans. My first year, I was one of 3. Like you are a very recognizable figure, which means a lot of things are accessible to you. And then also employment opportunities. I never would have ended up at Anheuser-Busch's Global Innovation and Investment team if I hadn't gone to a school that had access to that kind of opportunity. And as terrible as it is to say that, like that is just the reality of how a lot of career recruiting goes nowadays. You can network your way into just about anything, but it's much easier if you have access to the network and there's fewer steps between you and the opportunity. And if we want to take a look at the return on investment, for example, you go to Williams College, the most popular major is English, history, and then economics. You're going to be making $70,000 on average post-grad with an English degree. If you go to Florida State University, you're going to be making $51,000 with a finance degree. And it's going to cost you several times more to go to the University of Florida than it would to go to Williams. Again, these are incredibly selective institutions, but that's not the point because as a minority veteran, you already are interesting, you're already driven, you already have all of the skills and capabilities that these schools are looking for. So what do you do if you want to go to college? So getting yourself or a veteran in your life to college, you have to consider the location. You have to figure out if this is the right fit for you. You have to figure out what kind of financial aid packages they have. What kind of education do you want? Do you want to go to a STEM research institution? Do you want to go to a big school like Duke? Do you want to go to a liberal arts college? All of these institutions have different kinds of an educational experience. And then consider the campus community. Will you be one of a small group of veterans, or is there an established like student veteran association on campus? What are the alumni network and post-grad opportunities? What's their job placement rates? What is their graduation rates for undergrads in 4, 5, and 6 years? And this all sounds super, super complicated, but that's okay, because in a couple of slides, there's a bunch of resources that these organizations exist to help you. I would not be where I am today if I hadn't used the Warrior Scholar Project, Service to School, and my LGBTQ military community. That's just all there is to it. I was very fortunate. I found people very early on after I got out of the service. I was not well. I was not well at all. And I found people who took me under their wing, and they saw opportunities that I couldn't imagine, and they saw potential in me that I couldn't imagine. And so they took me under their wings and they said, okay, we're going to help you get better. We're going to help you see the future for you that we can envision for you. I didn't plan on living past 21, and I'm almost 30 actually. I turned 29 this year. And so when you're talking about, when you're talking about like getting places and figuring out what's best for you, make sure that you are turning to the people in your life who know more than you. Work on building your network, as we got all of that wonderful, wonderful advice earlier, and all of that knowledge. Like, focus on learning from people and letting them help you, because you can't always see the opportunities that are right in front of your face. I know I couldn't, and I know many of the veterans that I work with on a daily basis also can't. And that's why organizations that do this full time are going to be very useful, as well as your trusted friends. So why not go to community college? I'm sorry, this slide's disgusting. Community college is great. I would not be where I am today if not for my community college. But it is harder in community college. It is much harder. If something goes wrong, everything can go wrong. There's usually less support. There's usually less academic and financial support. If you want to transfer to somewhere that is not a pipeline school, for example, by not wanting to go to George Mason out of Northern Virginia Community College, the transfer office didn't really know what to do with me. Like, they tried, they were great, they were super helpful, but they'd never heard of the schools I was applying to. And that's okay, that's not on them, but it made that I had to figure out a lot more things on my own. And so there are some really great things about going to community college, because I self-reported my high school GPA. I didn't know how to get a hold of my transcripts. I'd had a name change that had been years ago at that point. I didn't really want to out myself to the high school, so I put it off until I couldn't put it off anymore. And I had a fantastic student class. They very, very diverse classes. I had accelerated courses. I had professors who cared a lot. And I was lucky because my class sizes were small, but they're not always small. I picked classes that were very small intentionally. Some people I knew were in lectures of over 100 people. And that makes it hard to be able to form a connection with your professor in order to get a letter of recommendation for transfer. But again, when you're speaking with the organizations that can help you prepare to go to college, these are all the things they will talk you through, because these four-year institutions will want to see that you are capable of performing at a high academic level. But maybe that means that you are very strategic with your community college classes, but also very realistic. Because for example, I have a friend whose transmission went out on his car. He missed 2 classes. He was dropped with an F, couldn't get a withdrawal on his transcript. He immediately is not eligible to apply for transfer at any of the top schools. It was his like 3rd bad grade, and it dropped his GPA so far down that now he's like, I can't do it. It's not worth it. And he's so demoralized. And so now we're spending a lot of time working on building up his confidence, working on getting letters from professors to explain the situation that happened, and trying to figure out a way to bolster his applications so that it can overcome his grades. And so these are the resources. Again, you can scan the QR code for the presentation link, and that'll get you to all of these URLs. I have used a significant number of these resources myself. At the bottom, you'll see a veterans resource spreadsheet. I got out of the military with $800 to my name. I couldn't go home. I was disassociating. I was not well. And I was able to kind of pull my life together because people saw opportunities and potential and somebody worth investing in me when I didn't see that for myself. And so once I kind of got my feet under me, I realized that it didn't have to be that hard, and it shouldn't be that hard. And so that's what you'll see here in the Veterans Resource Spreadsheet. It's a collection of resources that I've put together. And if you want to add something to it, feel free to add a comment, but please reach out. You don't have to do this. It doesn't have to be hard. And just because you're a veteran doesn't mean that you have to subscribe to the narratives that the rest of the world says about us. Okay, I'm done. I'll get off my soapbox. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Landon, so much. No, you're great. Thank you so, so much. I appreciated all the visuals because I'm a visual person. So I'm grateful for your slides. They do look absolutely amazing. And you talked about such great information concerning education, because what you said is true. Like a lot of us be like, oh, don't do it, don't do it. But more than that, I felt like you presented like an avenue that you can do the things you want to do through this vessel. You know what I mean? It's like, it's just an avenue.
Exactly. It's an avenue, it's a tool, and there's going to be like, I was in plumbing and like my biggest dream when I was in plumbing was owning my own plumbing business. And then I went to community college and suddenly it was, hey, maybe I could work in a business that I enjoyed. And now suddenly I'm working on a global level, and like I answered a person who is one step away from an executive. Like the world gets so much bigger at every step, and I want that for everybody. Like everybody should be able to have that chance and be able to chase the dreams and see, like, when you make choices, it should be, I'm choosing to chase this one thing, not refusing to open a door because you never saw it. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. And it's such a great point. And I get chills when you talk, because I know the feeling of having something great and wanting to share it with other great people. Like, no, y'all have to do this. Like, you don't understand. I'm in a great position. Let me give you the rules, the tools to success. So I'm super grateful for you, because everybody doesn't share. You know, everybody, there's some things that people keep to themselves. But thank you so much, everyone. That pretty much concludes our lightning talks. If I could get all of my panelists back. Now, I know what y'all were thinking. Y'all were thinking we called them lightning talks because they were fast, but no, they were electrifying. Everybody had such great things to talk about. And I just want to recap a little bit because it was so exciting. Haliana, she used microaggressions and blatant ignorance of the national government to express her indigenous people of Uganda. And then Brittany comes in and she's breaking down the ways to leverage your network on social justice through impacting using EI and J. Stephanie used the power of imagery to explain the realness of PTSD as an invisible injury. And finally, Landon, showing us the power of maneuvering around your veteran status through the arts of education. So this was an amazing, amazing lightning talk. Thank you all so much. I cannot thank you enough for spending your time, your efforts, and sharing your secrets to a bunch of people you really just don't know, to be very honest. So that is a blessing in itself. And I'm grateful. Us here in Minority Veterans are grateful. You being Minority Veterans, we thank you. And this concludes the Session A Lightning Talks. Aloha.